There's a kind of loneliness out on the road that gets into your bones, but it's a feeling I've come to know as a friend. For 30 years my world has been the hum of the tires on asphalt, the glow of the dashboard, and the endless ribbon of highway stretching out to a horizon that you never quite reach. You get used to the quiet. You learn to find company in the vast, empty landscapes. But there's a stretch of I-90 in South Dakota where the sky is so big and the land so flat that the quiet starts to feel like something else. It feels like it's listening. It was on one of those long, hypnotic runs, with the sun burning a hole in the sky, that I first saw one. At first, I paid it no mind. You see plenty of hawks and eagles perched on the power lines that stitch the landscape together. Just another dark shape against the pale blue, I thought. But as I got closer, I saw it wasn't a bird. It was too tall, too thin. The shape was all wrong. It looked like a man. A stick figure drawn in charcoal in the sky. I blinked, rubbed the grit from my eyes, and blamed it on road fatigue. I kept driving, the rumble of my Cummins the only sound for miles. Then I saw another one, a few miles down the road. Same thing, a dark silhouette balancing on the highest wire. This one wasn't sitting, though. It was standing, its arms out just a little, like a tightrope walker frozen mid-step. A shiver, cold and unwelcome in the prairie heat, ran down my spine. This wasn't a trick of the light. I keyed the mic on my CD, my voice sounding rougher than usual. Breaker 19, any eastbounders on this channel? Seeing something peculiar on the power lines out here, are on mile marker 140. The airwaves crackled with static. Then a slow, gravelly voice came back, the voice of a man who'd seen more miles than I had. Let me guess, son. Seeing little men dancing on the high wire. My hand tightened on the mic. Something like that. What in God's name are they? A dry, crackling laugh came through the speaker. You're in their country now. The old-timers call in the wire walkers, or the linemen's ghosts. Best not to stare too long. They get shy, and they don't like being watched. The voice signed off, leaving me alone with the static and that unsettling name, Linemen's Ghosts. I kept my eyes glued to the road after that, but I was aware of them. I could feel their presence in my periphery, dozens of silent sentinels watching over the empty plains. That night, I pulled into a dusty, forgotten truck stop diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress named Brenda who looked like she'd been pouring the same pot of coffee since the interstate was built. Trying to sound casual, I sat at the counter and asked her about the figures on the wires. She stopped wiping the counter and gave me a long, tired look. You're not from around here. It wasn't a question. Just passing through, I said. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My granddaddy helped build these lines back in the day. He used to say some things are best left to the land they belong to. Those things up there, they're the spirits of linemen who died on the job. A bad shock, a fall, a sudden summer storm. It happens. Their souls got tangled in the very wires they were stringing. They got zapped, and they never got to leave. She placed a slice of pie in front of me, but I'd lost my appetite. So they're stuck. She nodded, looking out the big plate glass window toward the dark highway. Stuck between here and wherever's next. They're waiting for what? I asked, my voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. For a way out, she said. For a charge big enough to break them loose. They're waiting for the lightning to come and set them free. I left that diner with a full tank of diesel and a head full of ghosts. The road ahead was dark, and every power pole I passed seemed to loom over me like a gallows. It was just a story, I told myself. A creepy local legend. That's all it was. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the image of those lonely figures, or the weight of Brenda's words. For the rest of that trip, and for several after, I made it a point not to look. But you can't drive through the plains without seeing the power lines. They are a constant. And I knew they were there, even when I wasn't looking. I could feel them. It was on a return trip, about a week later, that my resolve finally broke. I was driving the same stretch, but this time it was dusk. The sky was a masterpiece of bruised purple and bleeding orange, and there one was, impossible to ignore. A solitary figure, perfectly silhouetted against the fading light, balanced on the top wire. Something snapped inside me. Fear gave way to a reckless, burning curiosity. I had to know. I slowed my rig and pulled over onto the gravel shoulder. I reached into my glove box and pulled out the pair of binoculars I keep for spotting deer. My hands were trembling. I lifted them to my eyes and twisted the focus ring. The figure snapped into sharp, terrifying clarity. It was the unmistakable silhouette of a man. I couldn't see a face, just a pure black shape against the dying embers of the day. He was standing perfectly still, one foot slightly in front of the other, arms held out just enough for balance. Then I remembered what the old trucker on the CB had said: they don't like being watched. A stupid, dangerous idea took hold of me. At test, I kept the binoculars trained on him, not moving a muscle. For a full minute, he remained completely frozen. See, I thought to myself, it's nothing. Then I lowered the binoculars. Just for a second, I blinked, clearing my vision, and looked at my dashboard clock. 5 seconds passed. I raised them back to my eyes, aiming for the same spot. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would break them. He had moved. He wasn't in the same spot. He'd shifted 20 feet to the right, and his posture had changed. Before, his arms were out. Now one arm was raised, as if he were in the middle of taking a step. He had moved the instant he thought my eyes were off him. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. This wasn't a statue. This wasn't a trick of the light. This was something that knew I was watching it. I slammed the binoculars onto the passenger seat, as if they were red hot. My hands fumbled for the gear shift. I stomped on the accelerator, and my rig roared back onto the highway, spitting gravel and dust behind me. I didn't dare look in my rearview mirror. I just drove, pushing the engine harder and harder, as if I could outrun the memory of that silent, impossible dance in the twilight. You'd think an experience like that would make a man change his route for good. And for a while, I did. I took I-80 through Nebraska, I-94 through North Dakota. But it was no good. My eyes would automatically flick up to the power lines, searching. Every hawk looked like a figure for a split second, making my heart leap into my throat. The story had its hooks in me. I was haunted not by what I had seen, but by the question of what it meant. So, I went back. I had to. I started taking the I-90 route again, deliberately. At first, it was terrifying, but fear slowly gave way to a strange, grim fascination. I became a collector of sightings. I started counting them, marking their locations in a logbook. They became a part of my landscape, my silent, lonely companions on a silent, lonely road. I started listening to the weather reports with a near-religious intensity. Every mention of a low-pressure system, every forecast of thunderstorms over the Great Plains, sent a jolt of nervous energy through me. The waitress's words echoed in my mind constantly. They're waiting for a storm. Months passed. The weather was turning volatile. One afternoon, heading west toward the Black Hills, I saw it, a bruise on the horizon, a dark, angry wall of greenish-black clouds. The weather radio was squawking, a frantic voice warning of a severe thunderstorm south. High winds, golf ball-sized hail, and dangerous, frequent cloud-to-ground lightning. It said any sane driver would be gunning it for the nearest truck stop. But I wasn't sane. Not anymore. I felt a magnetic pull to drive toward it. As the sky grew darker and the first gust of wind rocked my rig, I noticed something I'd never seen before. They were gathering on every line, on every pole for as far as I could see ahead of me and in my mirrors. There were figures, not one or two, but dozens, scores of them, an army of silent silhouettes perched on the high-voltage wires. And they weren't still anymore. I could see them subtly shifting and moving. It wasn't a dance of joy, but a nervous, agitated ballet of anticipation. They were turning, repositioning, craning their dark shapes toward the oncoming storm, as if jockeying for the best spot. The air in my cab felt thick, charged with static. The hair on my arms was standing on end. The first fat drops of rain splattered against my windshield like stones. I knew I was about to witness something no living soul was ever meant to see. I pulled my rig over to the shoulder, cut the engine, and faced the storm. The world outside my cab dissolved into a roaring chaos of wind and water. My rig rocked on its suspension like a toy boat. The only light came from the jagged, brilliant flashes of lightning, followed a heartbeat later by cracks of thunder that were so loud they felt like physical blows. With every flash, the scene outside was seared into my vision, and they were there, all of them. The storm seemed to make them more solid, more real. I could swear I saw the details: the shape of a hard hat, heavy work boots, the faint outline of a tool belt. They were all looking up, their dark forms angled toward the violent, churning clouds. Their agitated dance had stopped. Now, they were just waiting. The low hum from the power lines was gone. In its place was a high, keening shriek that I could feel in my teeth. An electrical scream. My CB radio was a useless torrent of static, but underneath it, I could swear I heard voices. Not words, just fragments, whispers, lost in the electrical chaos. Like the ghosts in the machine were finally trying to speak. Then it happened. A bolt of lightning, thicker and brighter than any I had ever seen, didn't just strike the ground. It seemed to leap from the clouds and grab the power line itself, not a quarter mile ahead of me. The flash was absolute, turning my world pure, silent white for a second. The sound that followed wasn't thunder. It was an explosion, a deafening crack that felt like it had ripped the air in two. In that single, eternal moment of the flash, I saw it. The figure closest to the strike was no longer a silhouette. For a fraction of a second, I saw a man. A real man, his face turned upward, etched with lines of exhaustion and hope. His eyes were wide not with fear, but with a look of profound, desperate relief. He was engulfed in a halo of pure, white energy, his form becoming transparent. And then, as the world plunged back into darkness, and the rolling boom of the explosion washed over me, he was gone. Not just gone. The spot on the wire where he had stood was empty. I stared, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white. Another flash of lightning lit up the sky. I frantically scanned the line. The other figures were still there, but there was a definite empty space where that one had been. One by one, as the storm raged directly overhead, it happened again and again. A bolt would connect with the line, and in the searing light, another soul would be consumed, vaporized, released from its long purgatory on the wire. I was witnessing their salvation. A terrifying, beautiful, electrical exodus. I wasn't just a spectator anymore. I felt like a priest, the sole congregant at a holy, terrifying ceremony. I sat there, paralyzed by a mixture of sheer terror and sacred awe, watching them leave this world in a blaze of glory until the storm finally began to rumble its way east. The storm passed as quickly and violently as it had arrived. The roaring wind softened to a mournful sigh, the torrential rain to a gentle drizzle, and then to nothing. The thunder grumbled its way over the horizon, leaving behind a profound, ringing silence that was deeper and more absolute than any quiet I had ever known. The world outside my truck smelled clean and electric, charged with the sharp scent of ozone and rain-soaked prairie earth. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there in my cab, watching the first hints of dawn creep over the plains, painting the bruised, retreating clouds in shades of soft gray and pink. My heart slowly returned to a normal rhythm. The world was being reborn in the new light, and it felt like I was too. Finally, when the sun was fully up, casting a gentle golden light across the wet highway, I opened the door and stepped out. The air was cool and fresh. I walked a few paces from my rig and just stood there on the damp gravel, looking up. The wires were empty, completely, utterly empty. From one horizon to the other, there was nothing. No dark shapes, no balancing figures, not even a hawk taking its morning perch. The lines just stretched on, silent and still, glistening with leftover raindrops in the morning sun. The feeling of being watched, a feeling I had grown so accustomed to on this stretch of road, was gone. The air itself felt lighter, cleaner, as if a great, unspoken tension had been released from the land itself. They were all gone. The storm had come, and it had set them free. I walked back to my truck in a daze, my boots crunching on the gravel. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, but also a deep, unshakable awe. I had been a witness to a miracle, or a nightmare, or maybe both. I've driven that route through South Dakota 100 times since that night. I always look up. It's a habit now, a reflex. But I've never seen them again. The wires have remained empty. Sometimes I wonder if they're all gone for good, or if, over the years, new souls get trapped up there beginning their own long, patient watch for their own storm. I don't tell this story to many people. Most would call me crazy, say I was overtired, that the storm and the loneliness got the best of me. And maybe they're right. The road can do strange things to a man's mind. But I know what I saw. I know the feeling of that charged air and the sound of those electrical screams. So, if you're ever driving out there in the big empty of South Dakota and the sky starts to look mean, maybe find a place to stop. And if you happen to see a dark shape on the wires against the setting sun, don't stare. Don't be afraid. Just give a little nod. Wish them well. They've been waiting a long, long time for the rain. And all any of us really want, in the end, is to finally go home.